So we come to the review of the 20th James Bond adventure. 20 films down, and there's still life in the old dog yet. The film is Die Another Day, quite an apt title, I suppose. There were a number of rumoured titles, a lot of rumours about who was going to be in the film, more so than perhaps any of the other films in the series, leading up to the release of Die Another Day. The best rumour I heard was that Sean Connery was going to play a cameo role as James Bond's father in the film, which was an interesting one. Nigel Havers was going to be the villain at one point as well, and there was also the biggest rumour I remember from the time was that back in 2001 there was one rumour that the film was going to be called Final Assignment and it would be the last James Bond film, which is just slightly ridiculous. But the other one was the most popular rumour of a film title was actually Beyond the Ice, which I think actually it works better as a title, but the producers decided to go with Die Another Day in the end, which is fine, it's fair enough. And as I say, it's quite apt because James Bond is still alive and kicking at his 20th James Bond adventure. Now, the man hired to direct the film is Once Were Warriors director Lee Tamahori, who has gone on to direct a couple of the Jack Ryan films. Along Came a Spider. I think it was actually released in the same year or the year before Die Another Day. So he was notable for action. Obviously, Michael Apted, the director of The World Is Not Enough, was not a notable action director. He was more akin to dramatic films as a director. So that was kind of the direction that The World Is Not Enough went into. But this time, Die Another Day was bang for your bucks. Basically, it was a big James Bond production, one of the biggest to date. In fact, perhaps the biggest to date. Huge budget for the film, and the film did enormously well at the box office. It was the biggest James Bond film to date, apart from inflation for Thunderball, which is still, I think, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, James Bond film of all time. But Die Another Day certainly did extremely well at the box office. And I think the fact for that was mainly because it was the 40th anniversary of the series. The series began in 1962, and in November 2002, the film premiered to packed houses. Looking back at the film, I remember going to see the film in the cinema back in 10 years ago now, back in 2002, and I was so excited to see the film. I just thought, oh, this is going to be fantastic. I'm going to love it. And I was even excited when I got the DVD because at the time I loved the film. I thought it was great. And I was 15 when the film was released. And still, for a 15-year-old, I didn't spot the inconsistencies and the incongruencies in the film, but obviously now I do, having analysed the James Bond films and watched them repeatedly. So there are a number of problems with Die Another Day, but let's start with the positives. The pre-credit sequence, although there is some dodgy dialogue, it's a great pre-title sequence. James Bond getting captured and tortured. And the opening sequence. We have the villain, Colonel Moon, as well, who is played by Will Yun Lee in the opening sequence, but of course the character will go through gene therapy later in the film, so he becomes a different character and the central villain of the film later in the picture. But it's a good pre-credit sequence. Bond is discovered to be an imposter, and he is kept in Korea, and he is tortured. And it's a radical departure for Bond, actually, because to celebrate the 40th anniversary, you would think that the Bond producers would want to show Bond, at the top of his game, sort of, being the hero, managing to escape, like he's done in his previous films. But no, they decide to do something radical. They decide to have Bond captured and make him unable to escape. So he believes he's defeated the villain at the beginning of the film, but then the villain's father turns up and knowing that Bond has just killed his son, he decides to torture Bond. And the torture appears over the opening credits sequence from Daniel Kleinman. It's actually a great opening credits sequence. It's the themes of fire and ice work very well together. It's such a shame, therefore, that the opening credits are placed over Madonna's cringeworthy "Die Another Day." It's just one of the worst James Bond songs in the series. It does have. There's nothing good that you can say about it. It's a fairly catchy tune, perhaps, but apart from that, it just seems vacuous. It's I don't know. It's just one of the worst. It's very hard on the ears. It's the best way to put it, I think. So we go from that pre-credit sequence to Bond being traded with Zhao, who's played by Rick Yoon, and Zhao now has the diamonds in his face, and he is the henchman of the villain. Again, quite a strong henchman, and he appears later in the film, but he is being traded for Bond, and Judi Dench returns, of course, as M, and explains to Bond that he's no use to anyone now. So this is Brosnan's Bond going rogue, basically. Timothy Dalton did it in License to Kill. Pierce Brosnan's going to do it now. Pierce Brosnan's Bond is no use to anyone, according to Judi Dench's M. So Pierce Brosnan breaks out of the hospital, and he sets off on his own mission to find out who gave him away in Korea. So far so good. The story unfortunately goes rapidly downhill from here. There are some good sequences. We have John Cleese now playing Q, and there's a nice little nod to the gadgets of the last 40 years of Bond. We see Rosa Klebb's shoe, we see the jetpack from Thunderball. That's a nice little sequence, but then it's undermined by the Aston Martin Vanquish. Well, it's a beautiful car, but the fact that it turns invisible, oh dear. It just goes beyond the plausible for Bond, and as soon as you start doing too much of that, Bond becomes a parody. The film is full of double entendres. There's so many one-liners. Most of them more cheesy than good, to be honest. And Bond meets Halle Berry's Jinx as well, who I have to say has the most crass dialogue of any main character I can think of in the James Bond series, which is such a shame because the previous film, The World Is Not Enough, was written fairly well by Neil Purvis and Robert Wade, but they seem to give one of the main characters, Halle Berry, they give her a crap name for a start, Jinx, although her real name is actually Jacinta Johnson, but she's called Jinx because she was born on Friday the 13th, so what? And she just gets some awful lines. The most cringeworthy is Zhao coming up to her when she's strapped to the laser table, and he is interrogating her, and he says, "Who sent you?" And all she has to say is, "Your mama. Your mama." I mean, the writing is appalling for some of these sequences, and she really does get some bad dialogue in the film. At least we're going down together. At least we'll die rich. I think I broke her heart. It's just, some of the dialogue, I hate it. It's one of the worst things about Die Another Day. And another thing, actually, I was speaking to my girlfriend about this the other day, and we noticed how American Die Another Day seems as a James Bond film. Bond is British. He's not American. It's fine to have some Americanisms thrown in there for good measure, but James Bond is a British icon. There are lots of Americanisms in the film which aren't acceptable, to be honest, particularly for Bond's 40th anniversary. It's interesting, Pierce Brosnan's given a number of interviews around the time of release of Die Another Day, and he said basically they've thrown everything at it, including the kitchen sink. It's a mammoth film, and it is, but it doesn't mean that, more is better. Sometimes less is more, which is why The World Is Not Enough is a much better film than Die Another Day. Die Another Day feels too slapdash. It's all over the place. There's a villain's henchman in the film called Mr. Kill. Pierce Brosnan's Bond even has some very questionable dialogue. He says, "Well, there's a name to die for, Mr. Kill. Well, there's a name to die for." I mean, it's just some of it is just shocking. Some of the work that went into Die Another Day is just shocking. But the most unforgivable sequence, I have to say, is the kite surfing sequence, the windsurfing. It's just it was the death of Bond, in my opinion. It's the worst thing that they've ever done in the James Bond series, and they can never have that amount of CGI again, because they will be in jeopardy of destroying Bond, I think. So there are some moments. I mean, I'm really putting Die Another Day down as a film. It's certainly Pierce Brosnan's worst James Bond film, certainly. But there are some good credits to the film. Miranda Frost, played by Rosamund Pike, is a nice newcomer to the film. She does have some questionable dialogue once again, but she actually is an interesting character in a film with plenty of uninteresting characters. Toby Stephens is plays an interesting adversary to Bond, although the idea of his character is totally unbelievable. The fact that he's gone through gene therapy and he has gone from speaking Korean to now having this perfect English accent, it's very implausible. But he does really ham the character up, and for playing the character that he does, he actually plays quite a smarmy villain, and he does actually play it fairly well. But all in all, it's a disappointing entry in the series, and a very disappointing way to celebrate Bond's 40th anniversary, in my opinion. David Arnold's score as well is under par in this film. The one saving grace for it is there are very nice choral elements. There's some very good use of a choir over a number of the scenes in Die Another Day, which works to its advantage. But there are so many negative moments in Die Another Day that it's hard to find the positives, really. Which is a great shame, because at the time I loved it, but looking back now, 10 years on, it's a bit of an embarrassment as a film in the James Bond series. So luckily, James Bond will return in a new guise with a brand new 007. Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson achieved the rights to Ian Fleming's first James Bond novel, Casino Royale, in the year 2000. And after Pierce Brosnan's final film, they decided it was about time to introduce a new Bond and to take Bond back to his roots. So they decided to film Casino Royale in 2006. So it would be the longest gap between Bonds since the gap between Licence to Kill and GoldenEye. That was a 6-year gap. This time, they needed the time, I think, to really assess where to take Bond. What was the future of 007? Die Another Day was kind of sort of Moonraker excess, and they needed to take Bond back down to earth. So in some respects, you can make the analogy that Moonraker is like Die Another Day, and Casino Royale is like For Your Eyes Only. Casino Royale is stripping Bond of many of the gadgets and bringing him back down to basics. This is the return of a human side of 007 and a new James Bond actor. So, all in all, the Pierce Brosnan era of Bond is fairly decent. A lot of the films, though, it's very interesting. In the Everything or Nothing documentary, Pierce Brosnan's interviewed, and he says the only film he can remember of his is GoldenEye. He even says at one point, which was my second film? Was it Tomorrow Never Dies or The World Is Not Enough? I can't remember. They all seem the same to me. Which basically sums his era of Bond up to a T, basically. A lot of his films do seem very much the same, and it's quite hard to differentiate between them. So James Bond will return, much harder edged, in Casino Royale.